Hello gardening friends and welcome to All About Gardening. My name is Madison and today we are talking about one of the internet's most beloved houseplants, the Monstera. Monstera is actually the name of an entire genus of plants with some very interesting species, but the one we all know and love is Monstera deliciosa, also known as delicious monster or Swiss cheese plant for the holes in the leaves. The holes are actually what makes these plants so popular. If you take a look at this giant one I've got over here, they develop splits and holes in their leaves known as fenestration that allows them to seek out more light. There's a whole lot of theories for why they've evolved this way, but they do give the plant a stunning tropical look. Now, one of the most important plants of Monstera care, because they grow so quickly in the right environment, is repotting. So today I'm going to show you how to repot this plant, how to know when to repot it, and what to do when you're done. First, we're going to talk about when you should consider repotting your Monstera. There's generally two extremes to this process. The first is that you bring it home and repot it immediately, possibly into a brand new decorative pot. The other is that you forget to repot completely until your plant starts wilting and dying off. We don't want either of those two extremes in this process. When you bring your plant home for the first time, it's going to need some time to adjust to its new conditions. It's been growing in a perfect greenhouse for its whole life in the ideal conditions. And then when we bring it home and it's not 100% as it's used to, it needs time to adapt to those conditions. If you repot immediately and add that level of change in environment, it just causes stress. It can lead to yellowing leaves, and your plant should adapt and eventually recover, but we don't want it to be stressed in its new home. Forgetting to repot is definitely worse, but also an extreme that we need to avoid. Once the roots use up all of the space in this container, the plant is going to stop growing above the soil. They don't mind being slightly confined in their containers, but if they completely run out of space, the soil is going to begin to disintegrate. It won't hold on to much water or nutrients, and the roots will start to wrap around each other, making it difficult for them to absorb any of those water or nutrients that are going through the soil. So instead of following a strict schedule, going to one of the extremes, we're going to look for a few signs that your plant is ready for repotting. Younger plants that are growing quickly generally need to be repotted around once a year, depending on their size. It all depends on the performance of the plant. Older plants can stay in their containers for 2 to 3 years, sometimes longer, depending on the quality of the soil. The few things we're going to look out for are roots growing through the drainage holes, which you can see is starting at the bottom of this container. It's not too bad, but it's definitely time for repotting. And you can also see these roots growing out here that are lacking a bit of space. Also, if your plant starts wilting or yellowing suddenly and all other conditions are fine, there's no root rot, there's no problem with nutrients, then you should consider repotting. The other thing to look out for is the quality of the soil. It doesn't remain 100% perfect. It disintegrates over time. It stops holding on to water and nutrients, and these will cause several growth problems in your Monstera. So if the soil drains very quickly or quicker than usual, if you keep fertilizing and the plant still shows signs of lack of nutrients, then it's time to consider repotting. It's best to repot your Monstera in spring and summer during their growing season. This will allow them to recover much quicker from the process and get back to growing and producing new leaves. However, if you do notice any of these signs that the plant desperately needs repotting, especially if they've gone into the leaves and the leaves are starting to yellow and wilt, it's better to repot immediately rather than to wait for that time, just to eliminate those bad growing conditions and to bring your plant back to good health. Luckily, you don't need many items to get started. The first thing to look out for is a new pot. I've chosen one around 2 sizes up because this is a young Monstera that's going to grow quite quickly, so it'll fill out the space. But if you've got a larger Monstera, you can generally choose a pot about 1 size up. Don't go bigger than 1 to 2 sizes, maybe 3 at a push if you're adding a support in the center. because excess soil will hold onto too much moisture and will lead to root rot. They like to be slightly confined. It helps them grow better and push out new leaves. So 2 sizes up at most is about what you're aiming for. When you choose your container, the most important characteristic to consider is drainage. Your pot needs a drainage hole. Unfortunately, as much as we love decorative containers that look stunning, if they don't have drainage holes, your plant will eventually die. It's either going to be underwatered if you're being extra careful, or more likely it will be overwatered with waterlogged soil that will eventually lead to root rot. So, materials don't really matter. Moisture wicking materials like terracotta are best, but you can choose any materials as long as the container has a drainage hole. Soil drainage is also very important, so I'm going to bring in the next thing you'll need, your houseplant potting mix. This is my favorite mixture that I use. It's 2 parts potting soil, 1 part coconut coir, and 1 part perlite. I've also added a few extra handfuls of perlite just for these plants. They are hemi-epiphytes and they really hate sitting in water. So a few extra handfuls of perlite will improve the drainage, especially because I only have 1 drainage hole in this container. There's also other things you can consider adding, like support to the center, especially if your plant is large. This one's getting a bit out of hand at the moment. So you might want to consider adding something like a moss pole to train it, help it grow quicker. But this plant is quite young and won't need any supports for a while. If you want to consider trimming the leaves, trimming the roots, just tidying it up a bit, you can also use a pair of pruning shears, but this plant is healthy and it won't need any trimming, so I just need the pot and the brand new soil. Now it's time to dig in, get our hands dirty, and start the process of repotting. The first thing I'm going to do is hold the container inside the new container just to see how deep it needs to go. It should be planted at the same level so that you don't bury any of the stems. So I'm just measuring where the soil line will be so that I can fill in the container beforehand, make the process a lot easier once I get started. Now that that's at the right level, I'm going to remove the plant from its current container. This can be a little bit tricky, especially if it's very overgrown, because the roots will be hooking on to the drainage holes at the bottom and around the sides of the container. So I'm just going to squeeze it to release it from the sides of the pot and then pull it out from the base of the plant. You don't want to pull it out from the top leaves because it can damage them, so the less damage we can do, the better. Now you can see how desperately this plant really needs to be repotted. It's taken the shape of the plastic container. The roots are wrapped around themselves. They're basically stuck together. So this was definitely probably overdue for a repotting. What I'm going to do now is just remove some of the soil and tease the roots. When you tease the roots, you just want to release them so that they're not wrapped around each other, which can be a bit difficult if it is quite overgrown. The less damage you do, the better, but the roots will grow back. So if they do break off, don't worry about it. And we can release them a bit so that when they're in the new container, they can grow out into the soil and not around each other as they have been previously. So I'm just releasing these as gently as I can. This section especially is very stuck. And then don't forget about the sides as well. You can see they've gotten stuck against the side of the container here, and we want these roots to grow outwards as well. So gently release them, remove some of that old soil so that they can grow into the new soil inside the new container. This section is definitely very clogged. This is also where if the roots are too long, you could trim them a bit, just to manage the growth so that it doesn't overtake the container, but that will depend on how the plant looks. So we've released some of these roots, hopefully with as little damage as possible. And now I'm going to lower the plant into its new container. So you're just going to hold it at the right level. I measured that very perfectly, surprisingly. So now the soil level is just below the rim of the pot. This stops any soil from spilling out when you water it. And I'm just going to fill in the gaps around the space here. Now that all the gaps are filled in, I'm just going to press gently around the base of the plant to anchor it in place and to see if there's any large air pockets. Don't press down too hard. This will compact the soil and prevent any water from draining out the drainage hole. Just a light touch around the base to make sure it's strong and upright. Then I'm going to move the container back to where it was originally. Limiting any changes in environments will help prevent any potential transplant shock, especially if you've had to trim a lot of the roots in cases of root rot, or if you've trimmed a lot of leaves off of the plant. Then all there is left to do is water to encourage the roots to grow and to settle the plant into its new container. And that's how easy it is to repot your Monstera into a brand new container to help it grow bigger and better. For more details on the repotting process or on Monstera care in general, you can head to allaboutgardening.com for the full tutorial, and make sure to check out the rest of the videos on our channel for more houseplant tips and tricks.